Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Sugar and Frights. Thank you all so much for being here. This channel is going to be dedicated to my two greatest loves, baking and horror movies. I'm going to be doing some in-depth reviews of recent releases, talking about some horror movies that are in theaters, movies that are streaming, as well as doing some longer videos where I will be baking goods that are in theme with some of the movies that I've seen and loved and have wanted to talk about for years and years. So as the channel grows, we might be doing some other things. I have a lot of ideas, but we'll kind of just jump into my first review for 2025. So the movie that I want to talk about today is called The Damned. It was a recent release that may have flown under your radar as it wasn't widely released in theaters and I didn't see too many people talking about it. It was released in my local movie theater. I went to see it about a week ago. And I'd like to just kind of go over some of the things I liked about it, some of the things I didn't like about it. There will be spoilers in this video. However, I will put them at the end and I will let you guys know ahead of time that they're coming. So The Damned was released in 2024. It was directed by Theodore Palsen, I believe that's how you say it, who also directed the Valhalla Murders, which was something that was on Netflix I have not seen. If you all have seen it and you would recommend it, please let me know down below. It was co-produced in multiple countries, so it's technically listed countries of origin are the UK, Iceland, and Ireland, though it was filmed in Iceland. It stars Odessa Young and Joe Cole. You may know Joe Cole from his role in the Peaky Blinders. Almost lost it for a second there, forgot about it. As well as Rory McCann, who is most well known for his role in Game of Thrones. So a couple notable actors in there. The film is listed as a folk horror, meaning that it explores elements of folklore and kind of has a lot to do with nature and the stories that are passed down from generation to generation. The official blurb from IMDb is as follows. Ava, a 19th century widow, is tasked with making an impossible choice when in the middle of an especially cruel winter, a ship sinks off the coast of her isolated fishing post. So the story follows Ava, a crew of fishermen, and a superstitious woman named Helga, who I believe is like her aide. So what I'd like to do is break down my reviews into baking themed categories. So the first one being the recipe. So this is kind of like what elements are included in the movie, right? Like what things do we kind of have going on? What characters? Sort of like the setting, the story, the elements that kind of put together to make the movie. If you have any suggestions as how to better break this down, please let me know. Still working on it, still refining it.
Hi, all. So, as I was going back and editing, I realized that I said the recipe thing and then I didn't talk about it. So, like I said, the story follows a recently widowed woman and a crew of fishermen in a rural Icelandic fishing outpost. They are there for the winter season. They're trying to get enough fish in order to make a decent amount of money so that they don't have to work for the rest of the season. There is some tension that is building due to the fact that they are not catching as many fish as they would like, and they are slowly running out of food. Another element that is very present in the story is the Nordic mythology, specifically the mythology of the Drugar. And the superstition around this figure becomes somewhat central to the story.
The other element of my review that I want to talk about would be the flavor. So this is going to be the themes, right? So some of the underlying themes, messages, maybe story parts that aren't overtly talked about within the film, but just kind of present and maybe my own interpretation, right? Horror is subjective, movies are subjective, so is storytelling. So these are things that I sort of found while watching. So for this movie, the flavor, it has a lot of themes about moral choices. Towards the beginning of the movie, there is a big decision that one of the characters has to make, and it's based on kind of the life and death of other characters and sort of the moral choices that these people have to make in this sort of setting that they're in. as well as different belief systems. There's a few characters of differing religious backgrounds, right? One who's a little bit more superstitious, one who's very Catholic, I believe, or Christian, sort of monotheistic oriented, right? So they have these elements kind of competing within throughout the story, um, as well as themes of madness and isolation, right? Because these people are living in a remote fishing outpost and they're there for the season and they can't go back to the town or the village that they were from until the season clears because the mountain freezes over. The last part I want to talk about is the execution, right? So this could be things like the acting, the directing, the storytelling, the chemistry between characters, things like that. And I think actually for this film, the execution was potentially my favorite part. I think there was a lot of very good acting. The characters on screen had very good chemistry with one another. Their relationships felt very believable to me. When certain characters were in certain situations, I did feel for them. Like they created a very like well-rounded, fleshed out characters, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. Um, the cinematography, I mean, the location of the film is absolutely gorgeous. As I said earlier, it's filmed in Iceland, so you have, these giant snow-covered mountains, a very dark, sort of cold sea outstretched in front of the beach where they load to go fishing, as well as, a lot of darkness and just a lot of visual sort of playfulness. There's a scene sort of towards the end where the entire setting is encased in fog, so that when the characters are walking around, it's really difficult for them to see, and that sort of visually is really exciting and like visually kind of makes you nervous. So there was a lot of elements in the execution that I really did enjoy from this film. I want to talk a little bit about the scares, and I'm not quite sure as of right now where the scare factor is going to fit in with my sort of baking themed ranking system. The movie itself, I didn't find to be very scary. There was a lot of tension building, moments where you think you see something or you're trying to find something, you hear noises. The sound design was excellent. And aside from that, there wasn't too much frightening happening. There weren't a lot of jump scares. It was mostly about like the tension and long silences. Although there were a couple moments which was a little irritating to me where there would be a really abrupt cut that would act as a jump scare, where you're with a character and they're looking at something and then it really quickly kind of cuts to a loud noise, like someone like unloading a paddle from a boat or something, right? Like, so just this loud slamming noise all of a sudden. So that kind of felt like sort of artificial jump scares, right? Like nothing scary was happening, but they built this tension and then kind of like hit you with a loud noise, which I know can be kind of annoying for folks. Not a lot of visual horror, body horror, gore. There wasn't a lot of that. There was a lot of inferred things, and I think a lot of just like hypothetical fear of like, what would you do in this situation, that kind of thing. So at this point, I will be talking about some spoilers. So if you want to not be spoiled, go ahead and stop the video now, and hopefully you can catch this movie at your local theater. It is still on its limited release. I'm not sure for how much longer. It's currently not streaming anywhere else. But if that does change, I will leave a pinned comment below so you guys can check it out. But on to spoilers. So talking about spoilers. So there is a twist ending in this movie, and I didn't feel like it was as satisfying as I would have hoped. So when watching the film, so in the very beginning, the sort of catalyst for everything spooky that happens is the main character Ava. She makes a decision after seeing some fishermen off of the coast by these rocks that the characters called the Teeth. Their boat is sinking, they're in distress. So the fishermen have an opportunity to try and save them, and they turn to her as it is her fishing outpost, and she's the one who's sort of in control and makes the decisions. And she ultimately decides that they are not going to go and rescue these people. They're essentially going to leave them to die. And so when they make that decision, they don't fish for the day, and then later on they go out, they find um, a barrel, I guess, full of cured meats. So they go out again in the middle of the night to see if there's any additional food items, because of where they are, they're stuck for the season, and if they don't have enough food, they don't have enough food, and then they starve essentially. So they go to see if they can find any other food, and in doing so, they encounter some of the members of the boat who are struggling to try to get onto their boat. One of the fishermen falls off. One of them kills another one of the stranded fishermen. I believe they're speaking Italian. The fishermen whose boat was capsized, so they don't understand each other. It's a very tense scene. It's very loud, and you can feel kind of like the cold, just the water splashing, things like that. And then after that, there's sort of a lot of things that are happening that are potentially supernatural, right? Related to this figure that is the primary um, sort of evil entity throughout. Some of the fishermen, they lose their minds. One of them has to be killed by the other team members, the fisherman, because he's losing his mind. So they all end up sort of killing one another. And in the end, it is only Ava and two of the fishermen remaining. And as she is attempting to flee the outpost and take their chances trying to wander back to whatever town, she is shown essentially dousing this creature on fire, with gasoline and lighting it on fire, right? And then as she leaves, the building goes up in flames, and then it is sort of very abruptly revealed. Um, you watch the scene again from her point of view, but instead of it being a creature, it's actually one of the fishermen on from the boat that sank, who apparently had somehow managed to survive, um, and was creating all of the circumstances that ultimately led to the fishermen losing their minds and killing one another. So it's revealed, implied that the whole thing was just a combination of isolation and hunger, creating sort of this madness that led to them sort of killing one another in certain instances, but then also her killing the guy from the boat. And it just feels a little bit forced. It feels a little bit quick. Like all of a sudden, this is the thing. And I feel like we didn't get any sort of teasing throughout, or any sort of thing that felt like maybe that was going to happen. It seemed pretty sold on the idea that it was supernatural until it wasn't. And there were some moments throughout the film where it is teased that things are not what they seem. There's a really neat shot where you think you see this creature, um, sort of bent over in the snow in the scene where there's fog everywhere. And then it just turns out to be someone hunched over with a crow sitting on top of them. And it looks like a person standing, like a figure standing in the snow. But then it turns out that the crow flies away, and it turns out that it's not. So there's moments where you're sort of led to believe something, and then that thing doesn't turn out to be it. So I do appreciate that, but I feel like the reveal was just thrown at you. It had very little subtlety to it. And I could have used a little bit smarter, I guess, a little more clever of a reveal that wasn't just like, here's the same scene that you watched, but actually something was different, right? Like, I'm not sure, but it left me wanting a little bit more, I think is the main point. Overall, I would say I would rate this as a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't particularly scary. There were some moments of tension, some clever sort of tricks, visual tricks. It didn't give me anything in the folk horror genre that I haven't seen before. But overall, the setting, the acting, sort of the tension building was good. I would recommend it for folks who like isolated folk horror, sort of women led films in that sense. It's also, it's pretty under the radar. It's unique, I guess, in that sense. So if you're interested, if anything sort of in this video caught your attention, if it sounds like something you'd like, definitely see if you can catch it in theaters. Otherwise, it should be available by some point for streaming. But like I said, I'll keep that information updated in the pinned comment. 3 out of 5 stars. I liked it. Probably wouldn't rewatch it, but I would recommend for people who typically like folk horror, isolated settings, women led, and it's a good movie to check out if you're interested in foreign films, sort of not mainstream releases, that sort of thing. Thank you all for joining me on this journey, starting my new channel. I know it's probably going to be a little rocky, a little bumpy for the first few videos, but if you have any recommendations, things that you think I should review, or things that you think I can improve, ways to sort of tighten up what I'm working on, what I'm doing, please let me know. I'd definitely be interested. And hopefully I'll be setting up another video sometime soon. We'll see. I gotta kind of get the hang of this thing. But until then, I'll see you. Thanks.